abortion legal. Keep abortion legal. Keep abortion legal. Keep abortion legal. Keep abortion legal. Trap traps women. 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 The war on women is a war on people. 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 Roe is law. Roe is law. Roe is law. Roe is law. Roe means freedom. Roe means freedom. Roe means freedom. Roe means freedom. Roe is law. Roe is law. Roe is law. Roe is law.
Thank you so much to Noah for leading those awesome chants. Thank you so much for coming out to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Roe v. Wade. 40 years ago, the Supreme Court handed down one of the most important decisions for reproductive rights. And I just want to recognize members of the Pro-Choice Coalition who helped us put this event together, and also like to recognize the speakers who we have here today. You're going to hear some excellent speakers who have been fighting for reproductive rights and reproductive justice and will continue to fight, because we need to make sure that Roe v. Wade stays legal today and for the next 40 years. And we're so excited to be here and help do that in Virginia. So I'd like to give a big round of applause, and we're going to welcome Anna from Progress, Virginia. She's going to be our MC for the day, and she will help introduce the speakers. So thanks so much.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Our first speaker this morning is Senator Barbara Favola, who has been one of our most steadfast pro-choice allies in the General Assembly. Just last week, Senator Favola joined Senator Ralph Northam in patroning a bill to repeal Virginia's invasive and medically unnecessary mandatory ultrasound requirement. I'm sure I can speak for all of us here when I say that I'm so grateful to Senator Favola for her dedication and leadership on women's health and rights, and it's my pleasure to welcome Senator Favola.
Thank you. Great day this is. Thank you all for coming out. I know it's cold, but there is no cause as worthy as protecting a woman's constitutional right to privacy. A woman's constitutional right to access an abortion should she feel that's the right decision. There is nothing more worthy than standing up for what you want your government to do and what your government to not do. This is a real important issue. You are paving the way for our daughters and our sisters and for the generations that come behind us to really understand what their life should be, what their quality of life should be, and again, what the role of government should be. These past few General Assembly sessions we've passed legislation, terrible legislation, which would require medically unnecessary ultrasound procedure totally intended to intimidate a woman and to demean a woman simply because some people want to force their agenda on you, as though we can't make up our own minds. That has to go. And the General Assembly passed the TRAP bill and the TRAP regulations. Very dangerous, very dangerous. TRAP essentially is the targeted regulations on abortion clinics. What it does is it will in effect close 17 of our 21 women's clinics throughout the state. And these clinics provide primary care and preventive health services, as well as reproductive health services, and yes, safe and legal abortions. And unfortunately, these regulations are so burdensome because the requirement would really dictate that the physical structure or the physical width of the hallways or the number of parking carrels would have to meet that of a hospital. That's so expensive, the clinics won't be able to raise the money to probably stay open. This is really shameful. I cannot tell you how shameful it is, because when women don't have access to primary care, we have terrible, terrible health results. Maternal and child health results are terrible. We have more babies with low birth weights. We have families that really are not well provided for. I mean, the entire health of the state is at risk. So this is really what you're fighting for. It's not just for our women's personal right to privacy, which, by the way, Roe versus Wade ensured 40 years ago and said clearly in the 9th Amendment and the 14th Amendment, this right was reinforced by, I might add, a fairly conservative Supreme Court. Yeah. So this is not an extreme position. This is a position that Thomas Jefferson would support. This is a position that Thomas Jefferson would say, my goodness, what the heck has happened to the Commonwealth? So I will conclude by saying, do we want government in a doctor's examination office? No! Do we want politics between a woman and her doctor? No! Do we want Roe versus Wade to be upheld? Yeah! And do we want the state of Virginia to protect a woman's privacy and everyone's privacy? Yeah! Thank you.
All right, who is pumped up to have Senator Favola fighting for us in the state Senate? Our program is Senator Mark Herring, who has also dedicated himself to the fight for reproductive rights in Virginia. Just this session, Senator Herring introduced legislation to repeal those targeted regulations on women's health centers that Senator Favola was just talking about. If enacted as written, those burdensome regulations would force the majority of Virginia's women's health centers to close down. So please join me in thanking Senator Herring for his commitment to standing up for the women of Virginia and fighting against TRAP and a host of other dangerous bills for women's rights. Yeah.
Well, good morning, and thank you for coming this morning. Thank you for your advocacy. Thank you for standing up for women's rights. Yeah. 2 years ago, the General Assembly majority, together with the governor, pushed through legislation that did real damage to Virginia's women. They pushed through legislation that might close women's health centers across the state. They pushed through legislation against the advice of medical experts. And we had legislation this year to repeal that. That legislation would have allowed the healthcare centers to continue to operate. What the legislation that was passed 2 years ago did was make access to women's health care harder, make access to women's health care more expensive. That was wrong. What the legislature did then was wrong then, and it's wrong now. Now, our Attorney General came in and compounded the matter by intimidating and bullying the Board of Health into changing the regulations. It ignored the advice of medical experts and overwhelming testimony from citizens all across the state. Now, they tried to kill this legislation. They did kill the legislation in committee a few days ago last week. But that was wrong, and we're not going to stop the fight. We're going to keep the pressure on until we get these things reversed. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your advocacy.
We're just going to do another little chant here. We're going to do Roe is law. So on the count of 3, ready? Roe is law! Roe is law! Let's see that side! Roe is law! Roe is law! Roe is law! Roe is law! Roe is law!
There is a beautiful view of your signs from right here, you guys. Next up on the agenda is Senator Ralph Northam, who is the only position in the Virginia Senate. So he absolutely understands firsthand the necessity of a woman's right to choose. And like Senator Favola, Senator Northam has been a champion in the fight against Virginia's mandatory ultrasound law and recently introduced a bill to repeal that procedure. Throughout his career, Senator Northam has fought tooth and nail to protect the doctor-patient relationship and leave reproductive decisions up to a woman, her family, and her doctor. So here is Senator Northam.
Thank you so much and good morning. And I'd like to just add to what everybody else has said. Thank you for coming out and advocating for what you believe in. I know it's cold, it's a bit windy, but there's nothing more important right now. We have some great advocates behind us, and you're going to hear some of them speak. You know, we need to acknowledge Barbara Favola. She has been up here for 2 years fighting for your rights. She's great. And I would just ask you, especially the women in the audience this morning, we need 20 more Barbara Favolas in the state Senate. You know, in 2008, I joined the Senate. I did it because I wanted to serve the people, to make the Commonwealth a healthier place. We've been able to come up here and use reason and science and do things like get rid of smoking in restaurants. So we've been able to move forward. But last year, as you all know, the social agenda rolled into Richmond. And the ultrasound mandate, instead of talking on the floor about things like transportation and education and the environment, we spent hour after hour after hour learning about transvaginal ultrasounds. That's wrong. And it's Senator Herring and Senator Favola have said we have introduced legislation this year to repeal the ultrasound ban, to get rid of the trap regulations, to move forward. We gave the opportunity to right a wrong, and it fell on deaf ears. And that's why it is so important for you all to be here today. You know, we're here to celebrate Roe versus Wade, the 40th anniversary. All of these pieces of legislation that we have been talking about are an attempt to erode Roe versus Wade. We can't let it happen. We need to tell the legislators, your representatives, enough is enough. I just wanted to let you know I have one more bill on the table that we're going to introduce this week. It's to make the ultrasound optional. It's to let these legislators know that it's going to give them one more chance to right that wrong that they did last year. But please stand with me, help me support that bill, and help us move on. Again, thank you all for everything you do. We have a lot more work to do, so keep up the good effort. Thank you so much.
Senator, do you have a bill number? 1332. It's 1332. All right, we have one more legislator here to talk to you guys. It's Delegate Gian Ward, who, like everybody you've heard so far, has been one of our most steadfast pro-choice allies, standing up on the floor of the House of Delegates to fight invasive ultrasound mandates, to fight against trap regulations, and to fight for your right to reproductive health care.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Delegate Juwan Ward, and I am so proud to represent the 92nd House District, which is the majority of the city of Hampton. You see, I come armed with my notes because anyone who has served with me in the General Assembly knows that I'm much better with notes, because without, there's no telling what might come out of my mouth when it's an issue that I'm passionate about. Now, when I was first elected to the House in 2003, that was nearly 10 years ago, I had never thought that we would see this type of a spectacle, this type of a debacle, this type of a nightmare that we saw last year. Now, as my colleagues have already mentioned, you know, we were the punchline of late night comics and the regular topical newscast last year. But I remember a time in Virginia where we led the country in women's health care. We were the first state in the country to require that 12-year-old girls would receive the HPV vaccine, which of course could lead to cervical cancer, which is really the highest cause of death among women. And I was very proud to sponsor that legislation. But in just 1 year, look where we have fallen. I would have never thought that some 40 years ago, with the passage of Roe v. Wade, that we would be still standing here today fighting and talking about birth control and how it works. But surely that's not what my constituents sent me here to do. But last year I was forced to have that conversation because of legislation like personhood, mandatory ultrasound, HPV vaccine repeal, and the list just goes on and on. But most of those measures were advanced by males in that body. But I want to be very clear that many members of both chambers and many men throughout the Commonwealth have fervently supported women's health issues and thought that it was just foolishness, and it absolutely is. But the fact still remains that that legislation advanced last year and was submitted by individuals who will never become pregnant. And that's why on the floor last year, I told all my colleagues to let the women speak. Because when we are debating issues that deal with a woman's body, we should let the voice of women be a part of that conversation. Because when women speak and we are heard, good policy is passed. When we speak and we are heard, you don't have to debate whether or not it's reasonable for the state to require invasive medical procedures. When we speak and we are heard, you don't have to debate what is and what isn't birth control. When we speak and we are heard, you have reasonable conversation about whether we should require that our girls and boys are vaccinated against the human papilloma virus. When we speak and we are heard, you don't end up arresting 30 individuals on the Capitol steps because they felt it necessary to protest their rights, to make decisions about their bodies, because they felt it necessary to get arrested because they were not being heard. This is what happens when lawmakers speak and when we are heard. And that is why we are here today, because 40 years ago we were finally heard in the United States Supreme Court. But 40 years after the Supreme Court decided Roe v. Wade, the conversation has changed, and it is even more fundamental. The conversation about whether or not the Commonwealth and a bunch of politicians are welcome inside your doctor's examination room. I know they are not. It's about whether we can trust women in consultation with their doctors, their family, and their faith to make the deeply personal, complex decision to terminate a pregnancy, to have a child, or to choose adoption. I know we can trust women. So it is a fundamental conversation about the right to privacy and self-determination. It is not the fight that I thought I would be waging on the floor of the House of Delegates, not when I came here 10 years ago. But as a woman and a lawmaker, I will continue to speak out about these issues until we are heard. I thank you so much for being here. I thank you for supporting women's health. I thank you for all that you are doing to make the Commonwealth the best place in this union. And may God bless us all.